So for this session, we will be focusing on Jackson, who is a 34-year-old male. He is a veteran struggling with substance abuse and anxiety and depressive symptoms. I will be the social worker, and Jackson will be the client. Jackson has reported some previous issues with PTSD, anxiety, depression. He has actually had the audit and DAST drug and alcohol screens done and scored pretty high on both of those. So his substance use is a big issue. And his main problem right now is that he's having issues at home with his spouse, which has created some extra stress and anxiety. So his session goal is going to be to work on, focusing on his negative thought patterns, focusing on him needing to gain some more support and some resources, some positive coping skills, and to focus on, being able to feel better so he can communicate better with his spouse. All right. So Jackson, last time we had met, we had went over some of your scores from the DAST and the audit, and you scored pretty high. And we did talk about how your substance use was something that you were definitely wanting to work on. What would you say what has changed since our last session? How have you been feeling?
Well, I feel about the same. Obviously, I know my drinking is a problem. That's why I'm here. But I guess since we talked about it, I've been kind of monitoring more about trying to drink less. But as a result, the stress is still there. I'm still feeling depressed and anxious. I'm trying to be more mindful about drinking, but as a result, I haven't been feeling really any better.
Okay. How have things been with your spouse? You had said that you guys were having a little bit of an issue. Has it been more so with just the drinking, or since you've kind of been monitoring that, has it been more with your behavior or your thoughts?
Honestly, that really hasn't gotten better either. Usually I kind of drink because that has been an issue, but now that I've been more mindful about drinking and trying not to use that as much. Like I said, my stress has been escalating a lot easier, and a lot of situations where I would normally just open a beer or take a shot. I'm starting to realize situations like that where they really are stress inducing.
Okay. So that's really good that you're focusing on, pulling aside what these triggers are for you. And so you've recognized those. Ultimately, what do you feel like your long-term goal would be, from therapy right now? What can we do to help you feel, that you are able to have tools to not be using as much and to start feeling better, to combat the anxiety and the depression and things?
I guess I'm not really sure. Obviously, I want to drink less. I want to not use that as a ways of feeling better. But like I said, I still feel the same way. I'm still anxious and depressed. I still have stressful conversations with my spouse. So, you know, not drinking as much is the ultimate goal, but I feel like there's a lot that needs to happen in order for that to occur.
Okay. We had previously talked about trying to find some ways for you to, maybe start thinking of some things that you enjoy doing. Do you have anything that you do, or do you have a type of coping mechanism, something you do when you start getting stressed outside of using?
I'm not too sure because most of it is kind of centered around drinking. I like going to my buddy's house and drinking beer, watching the game on Sunday. I guess I could do that without drinking, but that's typically what we do. I like being active with my friends, maybe playing golf or disc golf, which sometimes we usually drink, but there have been times where we don't drink. So that's kind of, I guess, an alternative. other than that, I like spending time with my son. Um, but again, in the home setting, I typically have a beer. I try not to drink it in front of him, but I do enjoy that, and I feel like that is definitely something I can enjoy with or without alcohol.
Okay. So you've named that your son as a that would be kind of a positive coping skill for you. You're able to utilize spending that time with your son and not feeling like you need to drink, correct?
Well, absolutely. I feel like, there's stuff my son does that is stress inducing, but I mean, he's, 4 years old. So for me, I look past that and I can just enjoy his, being around him.
Okay. Okay, so we've kind of touched on some of your triggers and some of the things that you're using to cope with. So you do have some, positive coping skills. Your son is going to be one of those. And it sounds to me from our previous session that, your wife is a good, support system. We just have to get, kind of get you guys both on the same page to communicate better. So those are two positive things, that you have right now as a support system that sometimes, we don't always focus on the little things like that. But it sounds to me like you have a very good relationship with your son and with your spouse. So, those are some things that we can focus on as positives, that you need to remember that you've got those things and that, we can find different ways for you when you do get frustrated or depressed or anxious to where you're not just running and wanting to drink. Can you name any specific triggers that that you have outside of like an argument with your spouse? I know you said your son doesn't, being small, that doesn't usually bother you. But is there any specific triggers lately that have really made it hard for you to not use?
You said outside of my spouse,
Mm-hmm.
me and my wife. Well, that's where a lot of it comes from. But let's say if I'm at work or something, and we're at a situation where I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me. We work at a team as a team, so we all have our roles, but sometimes there's times for me to, um, I guess, do my part of the team, and it's very stress inducing, and I just kind of worry about what if I fail, what if we have to shut the machine down because I didn't do something right, or what if I say something and I start getting a lot of negative thoughts about what might happen if I don't do well, and usually those end up resulting in me not doing the best that I can. So there's
Okay.
that.
Okay. So you've actually recognized your negative thinking patterns, which is also great because at this point, constantly having these negative thoughts is going to, it's going to make you want to drink. It's going to make you depressed. It's going to keep you feeling down. As a long-term goal, would you say, what would you say ultimately? I know you would like to kind of, discontinue the use of substances, and we've kind of addressed how to do that. However, what would you like your life to look like, 6 months down the road? What is it that we can ultimately do?
Uh, well, I guess two things. One, when those situations do arise, I'd like to be able to draw upon more positive things. It's easy to sit here and say that I'm not going to think negative, but when you're in a situation and there's a very high likelihood that you're going to mess up, it's kind of hard to kind of set that aside and do what you got to do. And also, if I do mess up, even if I did have positive thoughts and it doesn't work out, it's really hard to kind of recover from that. When you look bad, when you feel like people are talking about you when you're not around because you messed up or did something wrong, uh, it's one thing to be in the situation, but kind of after it already occurs and there's really no excuse for it, you kind of just messed up. It's really hard for me to stop those negative thoughts kind of after everybody kind of acknowledges that you didn't do something right.
Okay. Well, we definitely have kind of went over, how you want things to be different, how we can, ultimately lower the amount of substances that you're using, the drinking and all of that. Um, Have you been able to make any changes in the amount of alcohol that you've been drinking? Previously, it was kind of a daily thing. Has it gotten
Mhm.
better, worse, or has it stayed about the same?
I think on average it's stayed about the same. I've had a couple more days where I didn't drink at all, which I
Okay.
guess is nice, but then the next day it just kind of builds up. It kind of turns into the next day, like I was telling you, all those situations where you're thinking positive and, saying nice things about yourself after you messed up. It's that whole threshold for withstanding those kind of situations definitely goes down. I end up just drinking more the next day.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I like to do with clients is often I will give kind of little homework assignments. And for you, we've identified triggers. You've identified some of your, ways that we need to work on ways to kind of find some things for you to do, when you get in a stressful situation, walk away, go for a walk, things like that. So finding some of those positive things, some things that, maybe you're good at, things that you enjoy doing. So generally what I do is I will have a homework assignment where you will kind of journal. If you are in a bad mood, say you're super irritated and something happens, write that situation down and how you handled it. And then when you bring these back in, we can kind of notice a pattern to see, okay, these are generally what happens. This is generally how I'm responding. And so how can we fix this, and how could I have a better, response in a healthier manner? And it's normal to feel anxious and getting depressed. These are all normal things. But, for you, to be able to continue to cut back on the drinking, we need to kind of retrain your brain to focus on the more positive things. Positive as in, you serve this country, and that is an admirable thing. You have a son and a spouse. So, focusing your brain back on those things are going to be kind of our emphasis on getting, you to be more mindful about what you've got going on and the good that you have, and the fact that you have a job. That's great too. So, what I would like to do is I'd like for you to kind of journal a few things, write down when you're having good days, when you're having bad days. And it'll kind of give us a timeline as to, where we can go from here. And we can focus on, your triggers and what we can pull from those. Okay.
Okay,
Well,
sounds good.
is there anything that you can think of that I did not address, or anything that you'd like to add, correct, or change from our session today?
No, you kind of said that, going on a walk or hanging out with your son is nice, but I'm not always in those situations. But afterwards, you kind of talked about being mindful of those situations and kind of drawing attention to, the stress that is arising. So I think you've kind of hit every aspect of this problem right now.
Okay. Well, I would like to meet again sometime next week. We can get that set up and go ahead and kind of journal for the next week. Stressors. It doesn't always have to be, negative things, positive things. If you are in a situation and you and your spouse get, in kind of a heated argument, and you decide to walk away instead of yell, versus going to have a drink, those are things that we can focus on too, because I bet you'll find some positives in there that you do have, and we just haven't been able to bring them to light yet.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Thank you.
All right. I'll see you next week.